why did you shift from your work as a psychologist to the climate disaster?
I started to become overwhelmed by fear. I was living in New York City, came here to pursue my PhD in clinical psychology in 2009. And then Hurricane Sandy happened, Hurricane Irene happened. The climate changes were becoming quite palpable, like how suddenly there's these downpours. And then, like in the rainforest kind of rain patterns. And what I was reading was just it was so horrible. So really it was also an emotional process for me of getting strong enough to face what I was reading. So eventually it started to be like a red alarm flashing in my face all the time. I couldn't really focus on anything else. So I started writing about the climate emergency and the psychological elements.
So let's talk a little bit about that. It does seem like our politicians are definitely in denial, but that could be based on campaign finance issues, like where they're taking their money from, red state, blue state stuff. But globally, it seems like even other countries are still a bit in denial. We talk about the negotiations when it comes to climate policy, but I don't think any real climate activists feel like anybody is really taking a vocal stance when it comes to this crisis. So what psychological factors are just right out there in the open that you can clearly, diagnose?
So there's a lot, and many of which, such as, humans' tendency to discount future risks and focus on the immediate present. So there's a lot of different factors that hold us back from full engagement or treating this like the emergency it is. But one of the most important and most powerful, that is also the most changeable, is pluralistic ignorance, or what Yale Climate Communications calls the spiral of silence. The fact that many, many, many Americans are very worried about the climate emergency. 56% of Americans recognize that climate is an emergency, or excuse me, that's of voters. But so there's a level of alarm, there's a real level of fear, but we're not making the leap from our own personal concern to talking about it or engaging with this socially and politically. And that creates this phenomenon of pluralistic ignorance, or what Václav Havel called living in the lie, where even if we're privately worried, if what everybody sees is just us just living our lives, right, as normal, that is actually sending a signal to everyone that I'm not so worried about this emergency. Things are basically fine. And so what is so important and exciting about understanding this pluralistic ignorance is that it really can be changed, and rapidly. That's how Václav Havel helped create the Velvet Revolution. And because through turning a collective unsaid understanding into one that is, given the attention that it deserves, like that kind of wall-to-wall media attention that we're seeing the coronavirus.
Right.
Yep. It has just tremendous power.
So what would be some of the things that could be done to be able to communicate the immediacy of the moment? I actually can just speak from a personal experience. I was talking to a close family member who is progressive just the other day, a little bit older, and I said something, they were like, actually communicating their stress about the climate crisis. And they said, God, it's coming. It's so soon. I said, no, it's now. Well, no, I mean, not really. And I said, well, what do you expect? Do you expect like the ice caps to just melt and instantly we're underwater? And of course, it's happening right now. I mean, you have more hurricanes. I mean, well, but New York's not underwater. But it was underwater, actually, and we were there. And so there was this back and forth about just the reality of, we were all on the same page, but we weren't at the same moment of crisis. And I feel like what does it take if you say, once that switch goes off, what does it take to get people to realize it's here now, we're screwed, and like, let's have a velvet revolution.
Yeah, so great point. And it's absolutely true. And of course, part of why is the multi-billion-dollar misinformation campaign and lobbying efforts on behalf of the fossil fuel industry. I mean, any conversation about what the public thinks or feels about the climate emergency has to recognize that, the most profitable industry on the planet has been intentionally lying to us for decades with incredible success. And so because of that effort and because of the media's failure and broad institutional failure, people largely don't understand how bad this is. I mean, and the movement hasn't done a good job either in terms of conveying that, because of these ridiculous ideas such as, oh, we can't scare people.
So why is that?
The climate movement has a lot of bad ideas that come from like the culture of science, particularly, of like calm, rational, stoic, like hyper precise, never, ever, ever exaggerate something. I mean, my God, right? So just the language they use is like, Larry Kramer, the AIDS activist and founder of ACT UP, he recently died just 2 days ago. I mean, it's like the opposite of him. He was full of passionate rage and warning, and like, conveyed through his words and his presence that, like he said, does every gay man in this city want to die? Like, this is coming for us, people. And yeah, so the climate movement for the past 30 years has been so reticent to really reckon with the fact that this is, we're talking about the collapse of civilization. We're talking about the deaths of billions of people. It is really hard to overstate this. And yeah, most Americans don't know how advanced, how both the scope and, like you said, the timeline, but my hope is that the coronavirus is helping people understand this more, because climate and corona are both unfolding at an exponential rate. And so this idea of curves that go way, way, way up, like really quickly, and therefore the necessity to intervene before New York City is underwater. By the time we get there, we won't be able to intervene anymore.
Thank you for watching The Nomiki Show. You can support us on YouTube by clicking subscribe, like, and sharing to get those alerts. And patrons, well, they make this show run on time. So thanks to all of you who have joined our community already. If you like our content and want more, from special segments to interviews and merch, you can join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. I'm spending all of my iced coffee money on other people's shows because I think this is the time that we have to support our independent media.